Let me get into my first topic. Joining me on the program, Brandon Arnold, Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union. Welcome back to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
All right, so the Senate Finance Committee held a confirmation hearing for Danny Werfel, not the former University of Florida quarterback who I went to college with, Danny Werfel, the OMB guy.
Yes, slightly different spelling and a very different individual. Danny Werfel, the former CBO professional, the former briefly IRS acting commissioner back in 2013, who stepped in to clean up the agency after the huge Lois Lerner debacle. I don't know how good a job he did in cleaning up the agency, but now he's been tapped by Joe Biden to lead this troubled, dysfunctional agency once again. And he had his hearing yesterday. It went somewhat smoothly. Honestly, the guy is very, very polished, almost technocratic in nature. Didn't really tip his hand as to how he intends to protect taxpayer privacy and taxpayer rights if he does indeed get the confirmation from the Senate.
Does it matter that he worked for both Bush and Obama? I mean, he's worked for administrations of both parties in the Office of Management and Budget.
I think it does. And I think, again, the fact that he appears to be more technocratic and less ideological, despite a lengthy track record in government, again, as you mentioned, working for both Republican and Democratic administrations, there isn't a whole lot of track record of him leaning in on any kind of policy issues, any kind of controversial topics, one way or another. So we've already seen a couple of Republicans on the Senate Finance Committee that have come out and said, I'm going to support his nomination, or I will likely support his nomination. This thing is likely to breeze through, even though there are dozens and dozens of important questions that need to be answered. And he didn't really tackle many of those during the hearing yesterday.
Joe Biden referred to him as the government nerd we need right now. I believe that was the phrasing. So is that what we want? Do we just want somebody who does dollars and cents and is kind of a technocrat, is kind of a numbers person, isn't really demonstrating that they're going to bring anything political or ideological to this agency?
I think so. You know, like I said, the agency is absolutely dysfunctional. And part of that is due to ideological skewing, you know, going back to Lois Lerner again in 2013. More recently, we had the ProPublica scandal where we had private taxpayer data released to the public. There has been no accountability for that whatsoever. I think somebody to recognize, even though the left loved it, somebody to recognize the fact that that's not what the IRS ought to be doing. And even though it's only billionaires and nobody weeps for billionaires, this is a breach of the public trust in this agency, an agency that knows virtually everything about us, how many kids we have, how much money we have, where we live, what we do. So that public trust is incredibly important. And somebody that comes in without that ideological bent, without kind of a liberal or even conservative agenda attached to their nomination, is probably important to fix up a dysfunctional agency.
Look, far be it from me to defend the likes of George Soros and Mike Bloomberg and Warren Buffett, but that's not the point, right? You don't lose your rights because you're rich or we don't agree with you. I mean, right on IRS.gov, there is a taxpayer bill of rights, and you are guaranteed privacy under their code.
Yeah, that's right. And again, nobody weeps for billionaires, but at the same time, what's to stop this same type of leak from happening if I go out and say something critical of the IRS, or I go out there and say something that might be viewed as conservative in the eyes of these bureaucrats at the IRS? You know, they can wield that over our heads and release private information for people that they don't like. That is the message that I get when you have a leak like this that goes completely unpunished. I don't know that Werfel is going to actually address this issue in a meaningful way. He was asked about it, and he did express concern that the privacy of taxpayers is critically important. So I'm going to be maybe naive, but certainly hopeful that this is something that he actually focuses on, protecting private information. And of course, that extends beyond just the leak of tax returns. We're seeing the IRS ask for more and more information, the bank snooping provision that fortunately was torpedoed. And now we have this 1099K reporting requirement where businesses like Venmo and Ticketmaster and PayPal have to report to the IRS if you do more than $600 in transactions. They keep wanting more and more information from us, even though they already seem to know virtually everything about our economics. And with that additional information comes a real threat to our privacy.
You know, Biden has been out stumping, I mean, not so much talking about East Palestine, Today we got the first statement about the balloons, but he said we need to expand the IRS. We need 87,000 new people to go after millionaires and billionaires who are hiring the best accountants. Well, they're not Tony Montana from Scarface, dealing drugs on the streets and showing up at the bank with duffel bags full of cash, if you've seen the movie. I mean, these are people who have some of the most declared assets: stocks, bonds, real estate, business holdings. These are not people, side hustling for cash. They hire the best accountants to make sure they pay all of their taxes. And when Biden's complaining that they use loopholes and deductions, first of all, those are legal tax avenues. If you're hiring someone to comply with the law, you're clearly not cheating.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. And like you said, the corporations and the wealthier Americans, they typically win these cases when the IRS comes after them. Sure, we spend a lot of money, both from a taxpayer perspective. They spend a lot of money on the attorneys and accountants. It's good business for them. It's bad business for the taxpayers because we're not recouping a ton of money. They usually keep pretty good books because they know the IRS is already looking over their shoulder. Now, middle-income Americans, lower-income Americans, those are the people that tend to mess up more. We don't have a team of professional accountants and attorneys. We rely on TurboTax and other programs to kind of get us across the finish line, but we don't necessarily keep as good a records as people that have professional people looking after them because we've got real jobs. We've got families. We've got lives. We've got things to do besides pay our taxes and keep track of every nickel, cent, and dime in our wallet here. So yes, the people that they say they're going after are the wealthy. But when push comes to shove, if they actually want to get more money out of people, typically that falls upon the small business and the working class Americans who they say they won't go after. But what I'd like to see is them to put that into statute, to make that law that they can't go after folks like you and I.
Well, you know what? And look, I'm going to run out of time here. I mean, most nominees try to keep their politics close to their vest unless they're stuck like Gigi Sohn with a track record. So Republicans probably have no reason, unless this guy demonstrates something, ideologically disqualifying. They're not going to just vote him down just to vote him down, right? I mean, if he's just a guy who's going to oversee the agency and the agency needs a chief, well, then they're going to vote for him. All right. Thanks for joining us. I got to leave it there.